Design a product for drivers driving during rush hour. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Exponent Product Management mock interview. My name's Kevin Wei, and today I'm joined by Spencer. So we're going to be doing a product design or product sense type question where we're going to be testing Spencer's creativity around designing a tech product. Before we get into the actual question itself, Spencer, do you mind just giving the audience a few sentences about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a product manager at Google. I work for Google Shopping, specifically within product data. And I've been doing product management for the last eight or 9 years, depending on how you count the experience. Startups are great, but not officially a product manager.
Totally.
And then as part of my experience, I've interviewed officially for more than 150 candidates and helped more than 50 candidates coaching through mock interviews and the like.
Cool. So we're super excited then to have you and for you to share your expertise with the students here.
Yeah, happy to help.
So we're going to be doing a product sense, product design question, like I said, and this is the question I like to ask. Design a product for drivers driving during rush hour.
All right. So just to clarify, the question is design a product for drivers during rush hour.
Yep.
Can I ask a couple of questions just to clarify things before we really get into it?
Of course.
Is there any specific goal or objective or so that we have with this?
Yeah, good question. I guess I'll throw it back to you. What do you think the goal should be?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to put that aside and just clarify all of our assumptions to begin with, and then let's answer like what our goal is, why we're doing this, that kind of thing. Are there any specific locales or areas that we're specifically focused on?
We could focus more around cities, but if you think there's other places where it's more important to focus on, feel free to let me know where the priorities are.
Okay, cool. If it's all right too, I'd love to just focus on the United States for now, just as a way to constrain the problem, but let me know if we should be considering other locales as well or to begin with.
Yeah, geographically the US sounds good.
Okay, cool. And then are we really exclusively scoped to like a product for drivers in rush hour, or can we expand the thinking or expand the focus a little bit so that it's not just necessarily drivers themselves, but like maybe addressing how to deal with traffic or that kind of thing?
Yeah, you are the product owner for this problem in like some tech companies. So wherever you think the priority should be, feel free to let me know.
So I'm gonna take just a second to write down some thoughts, gather some thoughts or so, and then maybe we'll come back to it if that's all right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. All right. So I think I'm gonna make the assumption that our primary goal here is to cut down on the potential of accidents and possibly even like injury or maximize or at the worst something like death, right, as a result of things like rush hour traffic. Does that sound good to you as like a good direction for us to set our North Star metric at?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're optimizing around safety. I can probably think of a few other goals that might be useful. Were there any other areas that you were thinking of that you deprioritized?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think other things that I can think of are attention or boredom. Those are kind of different sides of the same die, if you will. It's not quite a coin, right? Where attention is maybe again around safety or so, but it might also be part of efficiency. So making sure that traffic is moving when it needs to move as soon as quickly. And then something like boredom is more around like entertainment, right? So it's sort of like if I'm stuck in traffic, is there something that I can do that's making better use of my time, but still maintaining the safety, still maintaining attention, things like that. There might be a bunch more in here. These are just the ones off the top of my head. Would you like to go deeper into the potential areas that we could focus on, or should we stick with safety and move down that path a little bit fast or further?
Yeah, no, sticking with safety might be good. I'm just curious, like how you chose this area to focus on.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think for me, it was kind of just a gut reaction of like, what is the most important thing when it comes to things like driving? And there, I think, like, you know, obviously you want to get where you want to go, but I think there's this overarching piece of that, which is the safety component of if I can't get there safely, then it doesn't really matter if I arrive there in an ambulance. It's probably not a great experience. And I could see that if we can maximize how to make sure that the experience is safe for our drivers, we might be able to do some of the other components, such as reducing boredom or things like increasing attention or so might be a piece of that safety mechanism. So it's like, I think either we are going to be stuck in traffic and therefore we want to be as safe as possible while we are either potentially doing other things or maximizing the time that we have in there, or we want to be minimizing the total amount of traffic that we're in, which may or may not have to do with safety, but either way, we want to, like, we're traveling, we're in a car, we want to be as safe as possible. So that was kind of my thinking on that. Do you want to go deeper into any of that, or should we continue brainstorming about like where our strategy could be?
Yeah, thanks for proposing that. I think we're okay here. We can treat safety as the P0 goal here, and then see where we go from here.
Awesome. So now I'd like to maybe just real quick clarify like who our active users are, who are building this safety product, these safety solutions for. And I'm just going to brainstorm a couple of different potential user groups here. So the first is like a 9 to 5 commuter. And I'm thinking that this person is probably driving somewhere between like 20 to I don't know, maybe like an hour and a half or so. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so like it generally takes about half an hour to get from anywhere in the city to another place. And if there's like bad traffic, all of a sudden now it's like 45 minutes. So it's an increase in 50%. But I have friends in like the DC area and New York that, at least when it's not the pandemic and stuff, if there's a lot of traffic, it can make like a 30-minute drive turn into like a 2-hour drive or something like that. So I'm not entirely sure what the best rate is here, but generally speaking, I think there's like a bucket of people that are 9 to 5 commuters, Monday through Friday. They're generally driving sometime between 8 and like 10 a.m. and then again between like 4 and 6 p.m., something like that. I think there's probably another group of drivers which are going to be like school, and they're going to be similar, but obviously it's going to be more of slightly different dynamics, right? So there's like school commuters. Ages are gonna, like, you still have to be old enough to drive, right? So for our work commuters, they're gonna be like young to mature professionals. So probably on the ages of like 20 to 60, just off the top of my head. School commuters are going to have like younger drivers, so like 16 to maybe 60 as well, because there's also going to be the parents that are driving their family or their children to school. I think this is going to be a slightly different also. It's still Monday through Friday that we're driving, but we're probably driving a little bit earlier, so like maybe 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then we're leaving earlier as well. I think that would probably be more around like 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., something like that. That might not be totally on in terms of like when these hours are, when these days of the weeks or like the age ranges are. I don't think that's super important right now, but just sort of trying to paint the picture of like who these people are, who these groups are. I can think of another one right off the top of my head, which would be like professional drivers. And so this would be someone who's like trying to do some sort of like delivery. Maybe they're a ride share, right? So like working for an Uber or a Lyft. And like maybe they're more of like a corporate transportation. These are like the people that you see at the airport holding up the sign with like a person's name on it or something like that is what I'm thinking. So like a delivery driver would be, I mean, there's a ton there. There's like cement truck mixers, there's gasoline or freight or something like that. For our purposes, so so far we've identified 3 somewhat different groups. There's the 9 to 5 commuter, there's school commuters, and then there's like professional drivers. Should we maybe explore more potential users in this space, or should we perhaps pick one of these to be our focus to begin with? I can explain how and why I'm prioritizing that, and then move forward on potential solutions for these users.
We can stop the brainstorming here and maybe just prioritize one of these.
Awesome. So my gut is saying that the 9 to 5 commuter is going to be like the largest user group of something like this. I also like the 9 to 5 commuter because I feel like there's going to be a lot of overlap with that school commuter. I wouldn't be surprised if like a decent number of those 9 to 5 commuters are driving their child to school and then going from there to work, for example. Maybe that's only one half of the school commuter leg. But the point is, I think there's a lot of overlap here. I also strongly suspect, though I don't know this for sure, this is just sort of a gut feeling, but I strongly suspect that the 9 to 5 commuters are going to feel this pain a lot more. Oftentimes, they need to go like further, and they have to get there because it's work, right? Like you gotta pay, you gotta get paid, you gotta feed your family. Whereas like, absolute worst condition, if my kid's a little bit late to school, or goodness forbid, like they can't make it for some reason, like there are alternative means here, especially things on that note, kind of rambling a little bit, but there are alternative means for those students also to get to school. They can take a community bus, a friend can drive them, something of that sort. So let's focus on those 9 to 5 commuters. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess what I'm hearing is that they're the ones who are most pressed for time, and then they have the least alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's a good, I think another really important point is that they're probably also the largest group.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, this opportunity sizing sounds good. Where would you go from here?
Yeah, if it's all right with you, I'd like to take a minute or two to just brainstorm some potential solutions that we could put together for these drivers.
Yeah, of course.
All right, I'm going to think real quick. So, and then also, before I do that, just want to reiterate that we're focusing on safety, right?
Yep.
All right. So I've just brainstormed a couple of potential solutions, and I'm varying these from like kind of incremental things that we could probably put in place like right now, to maybe more moonshotty things that are perhaps pretty difficult to do technically, but might be worth us considering and potentially going towards. So if it's all right with you, I'm just going to sort of enumerate these, and then we can potentially dive into each of these deeper if we have the time or so. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, Kevin. So the first thing I was thinking is maybe the best product for something like traffic and safety isn't actually necessarily something that the user directly interacts with, but is more like an autonomous driving solution. Autonomous vehicles today are getting pretty good at highway driving at high speed, so like 40 miles, 50 miles per hour and higher. And then where you have a very clearly delineated lines on a highway, the route is clear. It seems likely that simply going at a lower speed in the exact same environment of a highway is actually an easier problem than going at a fast speed. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we can expand the cars that are able to do things like lane detection and autonomous driving for the highway into a more autonomous for highway and traffic. And the middle there is probably that really hard problem that we don't even necessarily need to solve right now. There's some cons to this solution, namely, like, what do you do with older cars that either aren't outfit with the technology to do self-driving? And we can either dive into that and try to figure out how to solve that, or if you don't mind, let's move on to some other possible solutions that we could consider. Does that sound good?
Got it. Yeah. So the first one is, I guess, autonomous driving, and what you're proposing is that maybe we could help some cars get there in a self-driving manner.
Yeah, and I think like I didn't say this super clearly, but it's probably autonomous driving on the highway when you're in traffic. I think if we're talking about a more urban environment, traffic lights, stop signs, things like that, there are solutions to that, and Waymo, Tesla, some other self-driving software exists that is trying to navigate those. But maybe we just focus on highway, low-speed autonomous driving to begin with.
Cool. Yeah, I know you wanted to enumerate some of your solutions first, so maybe afterwards, I'd love to hear what that end-to-end experience might sound like.
Awesome. Yeah, cool. So some additional potential solutions would be maybe more of a alerting system. So not a fully autonomous driving, but having the car have some number of sensors that allows the car system or the sensor system, maybe it's not even integrated in the car so that you have backwards compatibility, that notifies the user, hey, you're getting kind of close to this car. Hey, you're moving kind of quickly, or you're not moving enough. I don't know if you've experienced riding in a Tesla. One of the features that it has, which is pretty nice, is when a traffic light goes from red to green, it just has a nice light chime to sort of motivate or indicate to the driver, hey, it's time for you to go now. This seems like a pretty straightforward and simple thing that we could do with just a little bit of hardware that we would add to potentially any car. And you can do that. These sensors, I think, could detect traffic patterns, right? So it's like, it's time to go, it's time to slow down, as well as speed, right? So you're probably moving too fast right now, or you're not moving quickly enough in order to keep up with the flow of traffic, something like that. Just to enumerate all of the ideas, and please interrupt me at any point if it makes sense. Another idea, which I think is pretty obvious and something that systems like Google Maps and Apple Maps do today, are trying to find alternative routes. Some people just want to be engaged driving. So even if an alternative route is going to take longer, if they're actually driving at a faster speed than like the 5 mph, inch to inch, bumper to bumper traffic, having that as an option for the user to select that they'd rather take a longer route, but one that's going to be more engaging for them as a driver, seems like a pretty good option. Next, similar to the traffic and speed alerting system, you can have sensors and micro cameras that are actually pointed inwards. So this is focused again on safety, making sure that our drivers are paying close attention or being attentive. So having a camera that's in the car pointed at the driver to really try to understand, are they looking at the road? Are they paying attention? And when they're not, we can do things to nudge them to do that, to pay more attention, similar to this nice little chime. Maybe there's a light or so that tries to draw their attention to where they should be looking, which is namely at the road in front of them. And then finally, the last idea I had, which I would consider this to be like a really big moonshot, is trying to actually synchronize the cars with one another, right? So imagine, if you will, a system that multiple cars, if not all of the cars on the road, have, that allows them to communicate with each other and tell each other, I'm moving at this speed, I'm going in this direction with maybe my intention to go here or something like that. This is a super complicated problem of like trying to basically do like not air traffic control, but like literal traffic control in real time in some sort of distributed way with no central authority. But with events like, or advents like the blockchain, we've seen that there are possible ways of creating technology where you have completely distributed trustless systems and a shared state of truth amongst them. And so I'm not really sure exactly what this would look like. Like, you know, I can kind of imagine a world like this, and it's unclear how many cars would need to opt in and implement something like this in order to make a minimum critical mass that like it makes a difference or so. But I think it would be pretty cool, right? If like you and I could both have the same sort of software and sensors, and my car could tell you, hey, like I'm trying to get a lot farther than you, and I'm going to have to take the exit sooner. Would you mind getting over to the right? And I'm going to do that. And the idea would be that like the software just does this, right? So you effectively as a driver, excuse me, I got to speak.
No worries, bless you. And I guess like what I would say here also is just that theoretically, if all the cars were talking to each other, you wouldn't even need stoplights or stop signs.
Potentially, right? Yeah, exactly. Like I think the utopian view of this, if you take it to the extreme, is such that yeah, you might not need any sort of traffic controls. You might not need any sort of maps to try to channel some traffic one way and then other traffic another way, at least to the user and things like that.
Cool. So I love your five solutions here. I think just so that we're on the same page, I'll just read them back to you. So you have like an autonomous highway solution. You have some exterior sensors, interior sensors. You have an idea around alternate routes, and the last one is synchronizing all the cars together. And I know you flagged that last one as a big moonshot idea, right? Which one would you think you would prioritize if the goal was, hey, like in 1 to 2 years, we want to ship something that would make the world safer?
Awesome. So just want to reiterate that, like the timeline that we're now dealing with is 1 to 2 years. And again, our guiding goal and success metrics is around making the world safer. Let me just take a minute or two to think about this, and then I'll maybe give you my thoughts about which of these I would prioritize, how and why. That's all
Cool.
right. All right. So what I think I'm going to do is actually create a couple of criteria to prioritize each of these solutions, namely how long is it going to take, how technically feasible is it, and how likely is it, so the magnitude of impact on safety. So let's start first with autonomous driving. If in the constrained way that we just discussed about having it only on the highway and but moving at a slower speed, I think that that's like a fairly accomplishable goal in the next 1 to 2 years. Granted, there's like another stage of this, which is how do you retrofit an existing car that doesn't have these sensors, but we're not going to consider that for right now. And so I think that this is something that we could get done pretty quickly. I think the technology exists for this now, so no new technology necessarily needs to be developed. Maybe we need to modify our software and our machine learning algorithms that do the autonomous path tracking and are expecting a higher speed. But beyond that, I think this is something that we could do. Like the technology roughly exists for this. So again, that's like 0 to 1 years in order to actually develop the tech. However, I think the magnitude of the impact of something like this is probably on the lower end, because we're just starting with newer cars that already have this kind of technology. It's sort of an incremental improvement for them. And like we said, it's going to take a lot longer. It'll be a lot harder to retrofit existing cars with this kind of thing. So I'm going to give it sort of like a low in terms of impact. For the traffic and speed alerts, this is something that is explicitly designed to be some like a new hardware product that you could install on any car. And so I would give this maybe a little bit longer timeline in terms of more like the full 2 years or so in order to develop. But again, I think the technology for this already exists. So I don't think we're going to need to spend much time on R&D. I think it's mostly just development costs. And in terms of impact, because this is something that could apply to any car, I would give this more of a medium level of impact. It's the number of cars that could use this, the number of drivers that could use this, I think is just a lot higher. For alternate routes, this is something that I think, first of all, already exists. So developing something better, that's definitely something that we can do in the next like year, if not sooner. Technology already exists. So I think that's like 0 to 1 years in order to develop. And then in terms of the impact, this is a tough one. I think it depends on the headroom that exists between current alternative routes and figuring out how to make traffic generally less severe in areas versus the like what is there today versus how far could we go. I'm not an expert in that, so I don't really know, but I do know some really smart people at Google Maps and Apple Maps and Microsoft are working on this problem. So I'm going to guess that the impact here is actually pretty low. Because they've probably already done a lot of the really, really hard, like, they've probably done the 20% of the work that gets us 80% of the way to the solution. And now there's just a lot of grind left in order to get like only a small amount left. I don't know that that's for sure, but I'm just going to sort of assume and guess that. For the attention tracking one, and again, remembering that our goal is like saving lives or safety, improving safety. I think that this is something that, again, we could probably get to market pretty quickly, like a year or less, because it's just a camera inside the car pointed at the driver, and then some software that already exists that's doing attention tracking to make sure that the user is facing forward, paying attention to what's on the road. So I think this is actually probably the fastest thing we could do. And I think it has, again, like the traffic and speed alerting system that's looking outwards, it's designed to be able to be put into any vehicle, retrofitting an existing vehicle. So I think we could do this pretty quick. And I think the impact of this is probably more medium to high. Assuming, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming that a lot of accidents are a result of at least one party, if not both, not paying attention. And so if you have multiple people using this, the likelihood that you have more than one person not paying attention and therefore causing an accident, I think decreases dramatically. And then finally, we have our synchronized cars. I can't really see this being something that actually goes into production on a wide enough scale in like a 1 to 2 year timeline. I do think that there might be an interesting experiment here. For example, doing something with like toys where the technology in order to synchronize the cars and like understand what's happening is probably roughly the same. It would be like an MVP version, for example, right? And so maybe there's something there that we could do in 1 to 2 years. But if we're trying to actually save people's lives who are driving right now, this probably just doesn't make sense to do at this point.
Yeah, I think one thing that we didn't clarify in the beginning, and we can clarify now, is whether this is going to be a consumer product or an enterprise product. Meaning, is this something that I, as a driver, am going to buy for myself, or is this something that maybe Honda is going to purchase to fit all of their cars? Maybe we can assume that this is going to be an enterprise product. Would that change, I guess, like some of the prioritization here, or do you think the criteria that you had would still be more or less the same?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I think like inherent in that is something else that we didn't really talk about, which is like, who are we and what are we good at, right? So it may very well be that doing attention tracking or a retrofit of hardware for the car to sensor stuff, maybe that's just not feasible for us because all we really know how to do is software. Maybe we were ways before Google bought them, and all we really can do here is try to find alternate routes or some level of attention tracking using like a cell phone rather than like a hardware in the car. That said, if we are a car manufacturer, this does provide some opportunities for us, at least in terms of the impact that we can have, because we can start outfitting all of our cars with whatever solution we might choose. Depending on who we are, like what car manufacturer we are, if we're a luxury car manufacturer, maybe it's just about attention tracking because we don't want our users to be getting into accidents, or maybe we can sell this as more of like a luxury feature or something like that. But doing some of the things like the synchronized cars is probably not something we're interested in because there just aren't many of our cars on the road. Whereas if we're more one of these more like top 10 or top 3 like Toyota or Ford or something like that, where a meaningful percentage of our cars on city roads in the US are ours, maybe now the synchronized car idea is starting to become more feasible, right? Because we have control over how many cars are going to be out there. There'd obviously be a ramp up if we did want to do something like that, right? Like only our new cars would have these features. But the way that car manufacturer is going today, more and more cars are actually just computers, or they're computers with an engine of some sort. And so maybe we can start planning features, planning ways to allow the cars, like hardware, Bluetooth connections that are external, not just internal for like a phone that's connected, right? But start adding hardware to the car in a way that would allow us to build to this vision in the future. And then we can do like a over-the-air update to all of our fleet. And suddenly, all of a sudden, 20% of cars on the road now have this capability to communicate with each other and move forward or something like that. That said, if our timeline is still 1 to 2 years, right, we need to do something that's going to have an impact now. And I think I probably would actually focus on autonomous driving if we're the car manufacturer. Having been in a Tesla, having been in a Waymo and experiencing that, I think that one, that's a great safety feature that we can get immediate impact from now. And two, just like with the synchronized car, like we can build for the future. I think that putting all of the pieces in place to be able to do autonomous driving within traffic gives us a lot of the pieces that we need, the building blocks that we need to do autonomous driving, just period across the board.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. The autonomous driving solution sounds good here. Is there anything you would do in the ways of measuring success here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So remember that our guiding principle was like reducing accidents and potentially saving lives. Um, at a minimum, I think we need to be like monitoring or somehow recording, measuring how many accidents are occurring with the cars that are using our solution. In the case of something like autonomous driving, this is pretty great because presumably we may have access to the video footage, the video feeds of all of these cars that are on the road. And so like we don't even necessarily need a user, a driver to tell us that an accident occurred. Like we might be able to just observe it from all of the footage that we're collecting from this. So I think the first thing is like, what is our baseline for the number of accidents that are likely to happen? What is the amount of repairs that we have? There are a bunch of ways that we could figure out what our baseline is. And then second of all, start measuring for the cars that are using our system, like how many accidents are they getting in and how serious are those accidents? How many of those result in some sort of injury or more serious need to call the police or the paramedics or the fire station, something like that. How we get that data and how we track it, I think, is worth talking about if we have time. But I want to be mindful for that. The other piece of this, though, is I think there's a perception. So I think overall, our guiding metric is how many accidents have occurred and how many accidents do we believe we've dropped our newer cars, like how many accidents are our newer cars getting in versus our older cars, and therefore we've reduced them for the cars that have autonomous driving capabilities. I think there's another piece though that's pretty important, which is the consumer perception of these features and these tools. It may be the case that our autonomous driving solution is drastically safer than humans driving on their own in traffic. But if people don't perceive it as such, one, they might not use it, thereby like having the opposite effect, right? We have this solution that's going to help them, but they actively aren't using it because they have the reverse perception of what the reality is. But two, I think there's a lot of like regulatory and other perceptions out there about autonomous driving that we need to be aware of. And so in order to have a successful product here and kind of land our launch of this autonomous driving, yes, we want to know the long-term effects of how many accidents we're reducing. But I think there's a bunch more that we need to understand around like user perception, either using surveys or interviews or interactions with the actual service. And I think there's a similar to how accidents is going to be on a long horizon that we're going to be looking to reduce. I think there's short and long horizons for which we would be looking for the sentiment and interaction with our autonomous driving product.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for laying out those success metrics and the guardrails there. I think this is good for our mock interview today. So thanks, Spencer, for your time. I guess like for the next few minutes, I'd love if I could just have, because I have some questions for you here, but it's not part of the whole like mock interview thing. And I'd love for us to just have a conversation about the answer. Well, I guess like first I'll give you some of the things that I really liked. I love that you had a lot of solutions. I think most people only give like two or three, and you went above and beyond. You gave like one moonshot, which was really cool to hear. I thought the criteria for your solution was pretty good. And after I threw you that curveball, which was like, hey, like if this was an enterprise product, would your solution change? And I think you tackled that pretty gracefully. And finally, around metrics, I feel like most people really focus on those success criteria, but you talked about consumer perception and guardrails around that, right? There's probably a few other guardrails, maybe revenue and things like that. But I thought the metrics portion was really strong. I guess like I had a few questions around the some of the solutioning and around the user segmentation. So maybe we could start with the user segmentation. If I were to answer this, I think I would have went with dividing by age instead. I feel like it'd be a lot cleaner. I wonder if you had any strong feelings about no, we want to go with segmenting by like commuters, school, professional drivers.
I think it's totally reasonable to go more by age, right? I wouldn't be surprised if you look at the statistics for accidents that like you're going to see a distribution that is age based in terms of the number of accidents that someone's going to get into. Probably with, I'm guessing it's higher when younger, right? That kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's a totally reasonable way to go. I as I'm thinking about it, I don't know if that changes much, right? Like, I don't know that this is the kind of product that you would try to market to different ages. It's possible that if you have something like an autonomous vehicle, that younger people are more likely to engage with it and try it. But I don't know that being older means like you won't try it. For example, I have my father-in-law is in his 70s. His car has like autonomous highway driving, and like he's definitely used it. It's one data point, anecdotal, but he's not the I would not describe him as the most technical savvy person, right? So
Yeah, that's fair.
I think like if someone is familiar with using like cruise control on a car, I think they're likely to try this kind of thing. And then I think some of the other solutions that we discussed, such as like monitors and sensors in the car, I don't know that those have like I don't know that the age changes those, right? Because it's just similar to like how the general interface for using a car doesn't necessarily change by your age, right? Like there's a steering wheel, there's gear shifters, there's the windshield wipers, and your lights.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
I think like there are different cars that are geared towards different aged users, right? Where to a degree, right? But yeah, I think it's totally reasonable to group by age and try to make sure that like, well, if the 20 to 30-year-old age range is the most likely to get into an accident because they're not paying attention or for whatever reason, focusing on them and trying to make sure that we're reducing accidents from that age range is probably a really valid way to go and like central in on what you're doing.
Totally.
It makes it harder though if you are now an enterprise car though, right? Again, like just going back from where our interview went, because when I'm selling my car, like how do I know how old the person is who I'm selling the car to, and then who's actually driving it, right?
Yep. All fair points. All fair points. The next follow up question I had was just around solutioning. I guess like a lot of your ideas were around hardware. Did you have any thoughts around software solutions? I know you had one which was around alternative routes. Yeah, just like thoughts around hardware and software solutions.
Yeah, that wasn't intentional. That's where my mind went at the time. And I think at the end there, I don't know if you caught that, I kind of realized like, oh yeah, everyone or a lot of people now drive with a smartphone like in their dash, right? And a smartphone has a camera on it. So if you need some level of hardware, such as like a camera to track the person's face, you don't necessarily need any new hardware. Like you could probably just use the phone and put that in place. In terms of where we went, I at least didn't come up with any solutions that don't involve like understanding to some degree what the driver is doing or taking those questions out of the equation with the case of autonomous driving. I think there was one or two pieces that we sort of talked about that were predominantly software changes, right? So it's like there are a bunch of cars today, such as my father-in-law's car, that can roughly autonomously drive at highway speeds, right? So 55 miles per hour or above. And so that I think would be a software change, like all of the hardware is already in place in order to make that go by. But you're absolutely right. Like 4 of the 5 solutions that I provided require some level of hardware. In this case, like if I were to put myself in your shoes and be the interviewer, I don't know how much I would be concerned about that because it is a car, right? So it's like there's gonna be hardware in some way, like namely the car itself. So having a lot of solutions require hardware in them. I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. If I could go back and think a little bit more about like potential software solutions or so, I think it would be good to round it out more. But yeah, I'm curious, are there obvious software solutions to you that I didn't bring up?
No, I don't think there were any obvious ones, but I think that there could have been some where maybe you're improving features in CarPlay, or maybe there are apps that are using like the camera, or using like the, like if the phone starts moving, maybe someone got in an accident and maybe you can call 911 or something. But all in all, I thought your solution made a lot of sense. And I think that this is one that definitely students can learn from. It's a pretty solid answer. Really enjoyed this conversation. And I think we can wrap the video up here for time's sake. So for the viewers at home, thank you for tuning in to another Exponent mock interview, and good luck with your upcoming PM interview.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons below to let us know that this video is valuable for you. And of course, check out hundreds more videos just like this at tryexponent.com. Thanks for watching, and good luck on your upcoming interview.